Captain Jake Morrison gripped the metal railing of his ship's control room as red warning lights flashed all around him. The Iron Hammer was not a fancy military ship. It was just a basic patrol vessel, the kind humans used to check on mining, operations, and trade routes in the outer rim of space. Morrison had been doing this job for 15 years. Most days were boring routine checks. But today was different. The emergency signal came in sharp and clear, cutting through the usual background noise of space communications. Lisa Martinez, a young woman who handled all the ship's radio work, looked up from her station with wide eyes. She had been monitoring the standard channels when the distress call broke through. "Captain, this is bad," she said, her voice tight with worry. "It's coming from the Peacekeeper." That's one of the big Valerian colony ships. Morrison knew about those ships. The Valerians were a peaceful alien race that looked somewhat like tall, thin humans, but with pale blue skin and large, gentle eyes. They never fought anyone. They just wanted to find quiet planets where they could build farms and raise their families. The Peacekeeper was carrying over 3,000 of them, including hundreds of children. To a new world they had bought fair and square from the Galactic Council. "Put it on speaker," Morrison ordered. The bridge went completely quiet. All 52 members of Morrison's crew stopped what they were doing to listen. These were tough people, former soldiers, miners who had worked in asteroid fields, engineers who fixed broken equipment in the middle of nowhere. They had all seen hard times. But what came through the speakers made their blood run cold. The voice was high and scared, speaking in the common language that most aliens used to talk to each other. But whoever was talking was so frightened that the words came out broken and choppy. "Please, ... Is anyone out there?" The Thrakari came out of nowhere. "We never saw them coming. Our shields are breaking. They are forcing their way onto our ship. We have families here, little ones who are scared ... Please help us." Then nothing but the empty sound of dead space. Lisa's hands shook as she worked her controls. "Signal just cut off, Captain. Either their communications are down, or..." She didn't finish the sentence, but everyone knew what she meant. David Kane, Morrison's second in command, walked over to the main display screen. He was a big man with scars on his hands from his days. As a Marine, his face was grim as he read the information flowing across the screen. "Captain, I'm seeing 6 ships around the Peacekeeper," he reported. "All of them are Thrakari raiders. This isn't some random attack. This is organized." Morrison's jaw tightened. Knew about the Thrakari. They were a nasty bunch who traveled in packs, attacking weaker ships and taking prisoners to sell as slaves. They were cowards who only picked on people who couldn't fight back. The Valerians were perfect targets. No weapons, no military training, and a culture that believed violence was always wrong. "What's the Galactic Council's response time?" Morrison asked, though he already suspected the answer would make him angry. Kane checked his computer. "Minimum 48 hours, sir. They have to call a meeting, vote on whether to respond, then organize a proper rescue fleet. You know how they are with their procedures." Morrison had dealt with the Galactic Council before. They were a group of different alien species who tried to keep peace in their part of the galaxy. But they moved slower than a broken cargo hauler. They loved their meetings and their rules and their proper ways of doing things. While they sat around talking, people died. The captain looked around at his crew. These were his people. Most of them had signed up for this job because they wanted to help make the frontier safer for everyone. They were miners like Tony Rodriguez, who ran the engine room and could make any piece of junk machinery work. There was Kelly Murphy, a former Navy medic, who patched people up after accidents. There was Mike Chen, who had been a police officer on Earth before he got tired of the bureaucracy and came out to space. They were not soldiers, not officially, but every single one of them had that look in their eyes that Morrison recognized from his own military days. It was the look people got when they saw something that was just plain wrong and decided they were going to do something about it. "Captain," Lisa said quietly, "I'm still picking up some weak signals from the Peacekeeper. Life signs. They're still alive in there." Morrison made his decision. It was not a hard choice. The Galactic Council could take their procedures and stuff them. Real people were dying right now, and he had the only ship close enough to help. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the ship's communication system. "We have civilians under attack by Thrakari raiders. God as a council won't reach them in time. I'm not going to stand by and watch innocent people get murdered while we wait for permission slips." He paused, looking each of his bridge crew in the eye. "Anyone who wants to object can speak up now. Understand this. We're going in, and it's going to be dangerous." Nobody said a word. Instead, Tony Rodriguez spoke up from the engine room over the intercom. "Captain, my engines are ready to give you everything they've got." Kelly Murphy nodded from her medical station. "I've got the sickbay prepared for casualties." All around the ship, Morrison heard the same message from his crew. They were with him, no questions asked. "All right then," Morrison said, settling into his captain's chair. "Battle stations, everyone. Let's go show these Thrakari what happens when you mess with innocent people in human space." The iron hammer came screaming out of hyperspace like a bullet fired from a gun. 1 second there was nothing but empty blackness. The next second Morrison's ship was right in the middle of hell itself. The scene in front of them made every human on the bridge sick to their stomach. The Peacekeeper hung in space like a wounded animal. Its once bright hull was now scarred with burn marks and holes where the Thrakari had blasted through. The ship was completely dark except for a few emergency lights that flickered weakly. It wasn't moving at all, just drifting helplessly, while the enemies circled around it. And what enemies they were. 6 Thrakari raider ships moved around the Valerian vessel like hungry wolves around a fallen deer. These weren't the big, heavy warships that major military forces used. The Thrakari preferred smaller, faster ships that could hit hard and run away quickly. Each ship was painted in dark colors with sharp, angular designs that were meant to scare their victims. Tom Bradley, the ship's weapons officer, had his eyes glued to his targeting screen. He was a former artillery specialist who had served on the Mars colonies during the mining wars. His hands moved quickly over his controls as he counted and analyzed the enemy ships. "Captain, I've got 6 confirmed hostiles," he reported, his voice steady despite the situation. "All of them are armed with plasma cannons and missile pods. But here's the thing, they're not watching their backs at all. Every single ship has its weapons pointed at the Peacekeeper. They think they're the only predators in this part of space." Morrison studied the tactical display and felt a cold smile cross his face. The Thrakari had made a classic mistake. They had gotten so focused on their prey that they had forgotten to watch for other hunters. "Alina, you see that asteroid field off to our right?" Morrison called to his pilot. Alina Rodriguez was a former racing pilot who had joined the patrol service after she got tired of flying in circles for rich people's entertainment. She was the kind of person who could thread a needle while doing a barrel roll at full speed. Her fingers were already dancing over her flight controls as she looked at what the captain was pointing at. "I see it, sir. Nice thick field with lots of big rocks to hide behind." "You want to play hide and seek?" "Exactly what I want," Morrison said. "Take us in, quiet and slow. No sudden moves that might catch their attention." The iron hammer slipped into the asteroid field like a ghost. Alina guided the ship between massive chunks of rock and metal, some of them bigger than city blocks. The asteroids provided perfect cover, hiding the human ship from the Thrakari sensors. Morrison watched the enemy ships through his view screen. The Thrakari were clearly enjoying themselves. They had disabled their victim and were now in the process of boarding it. Small shuttles moved back and forth between the raider ships and the Peacekeeper, carrying away prisoners and anything valuable they could steal. "Those cowardly scum," muttered David Kane. "Look at them. They're taking their time because they think no one's coming to help." Bradley was busy at his weapons station, making calculations and preparing his targeting systems. "Captain, I can take out at least 2 of them before they know what hit them. Maybe 3 if we're lucky." But Morrison had a better idea. He had been studying the enemy formation, and he noticed something interesting. The Thrakari ships were spread out around the Peacekeeper, but they weren't watching each other very carefully. Each captain was focused on getting his own share of the loot. "Here's what we're going to do," Morrison said. "Bradley, I want you to target the ship furthest from the others. Take out its engines first, not its weapons. I want it disabled, not destroyed." "Why not just blow it up, sir?" Bradley asked. "'Cause dead men don't send warning messages," Morrison explained. but a ship full of scared pirates will scream for help the moment we hit them. That will bring the other ships running to investigate, and when they do, they'll be coming straight toward us instead of staying spread out. Alina positioned the iron hammer behind a particularly large asteroid. Through a gap in the rocks, they had a perfect view of their first target. It was a medium-sized raider that was hanging back from the main action, probably waiting for its turn to board the Valerian ship. "Bradley, you have a clean shot," Morrison said quietly. "Target acquired," Bradley replied. His hands were steady. On his controls. Years of training and experience had prepared him for this moment. Firing now. Die. The iron hammer's main gun spoke once, sending a concentrated beam of energy across space. The beam struck the Thrakari ship right where Bradley had aimed, directly into its engine compartment. The effect was immediate and devastating. The raider ship's engines exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The ship spun wildly out of control. All power gone, leaving it drifting helplessly in space. "Direct hit," Bradley announced. "Their engines are completely gone. That ship isn't going anywhere." Just as Morrison had predicted, the crippled Thrakari ship immediately began broadcasting distress calls. The panicked voices of the alien pirates filled the communication channels, screaming about being under attack by an unknown enemy. The other 5 Thrakari ships reacted exactly as Morrison had hoped. Instead of staying in their defensive positions around the Peacekeeper, they all turned and began racing toward the location where their companion had been hit. "Here they come," Alina said, watching the enemy ships on her screen. 5 of them coming in fast and angry. They were coming straight into a trap. Morrison's crew had spent years working in asteroid fields, mining operations, and salvage jobs. They knew how to use the environment to their advantage in ways that the Thrakari had never imagined. "Tony, are those mining charges ready?" Morrison called down to the engine room. Tony Rodriguez had been busy preparing a special surprise. During their regular mining work, the iron hammer carried powerful explosive charges that were designed to break apart asteroids. With a little creative engineering, those same charges could be turned into devastating space mines. "Ready and waiting, Captain?" Tony's voice came back over the intercom. "I've got 12 charges positioned throughout the asteroid field. Remote detonation ready on your command." The first 2 Thrakari ships came racing into the asteroid field at full speed, their weapons charged and ready to fight. But they were looking for an enemy ship, not for the trap that had been laid for them. "Now, Tony," Morrison shouted. The mining charges exploded simultaneously, turning several large asteroids into clouds of deadly debris. The Thrakari ships, moving at high speed, flew straight into the expanding clouds of rock and metal fragments. Their shields, designed to stop energy weapons, were useless against the physical impact of thousands of chunks of stone and metal. The 2 lead ships were torn apart in seconds. Their hulls were punctured in dozens of places, atmosphere rushing out into space as the ships tumbled out of control. "That's 3 down," Bradley reported with satisfaction. 3 to go, and they're finally starting to realize they're in trouble. The remaining Thrakari ships had finally understood that they were not the hunters anymore. They were the hunted. The docking tube connected between the 2 ships with a solid clank that echoed through the iron hammer. Morrison stood at the airlock, pulling on his magnetic boots and checking his equipment one last time. Behind him, his boarding team was doing the same thing. These weren't professional soldiers. They were the kind of people who got things done when the situation got bad. Dr. Amy Wilson was stuffing medical supplies into her backpack, her face set with determination. She had been a field medic during the colony wars and had seen plenty of combat situations before. Next to her, Security Chief Robert Hayes was handing out weapons to the rescue team. Hayes was a former police detective who had come to space after he got tired of the politics back on Earth. "Listen up, people," Morrison said to his team of 12 volunteers. "Don't know exactly what we're going to find in there, but based on what we heard in that distress call, it's going to be bad. The Thrakari have been on that ship for at least 3 hours now. They've had time to spread out and secure their prisoners." Kelly Thompson, the ship's chief engineer, was checking her plasma cutting torch. She was a small woman with calloused of her hands and grease permanently under her fingernails. But Morrison had seen her fix impossible problems under pressure that would have broken most people. "Captain," she said quietly, "I've been studying the Peacekeeper's blueprints. It's a civilian transport, so it's got lots of maintenance tunnels and service corridors. The Throckary probably don't even know those passages exist." Hayes nodded. "Approvingly good thinking. We can use those to move around without being seen." "What about weapons?" Morrison looked around at his team. They had a few standard energy rifles, but mostly they were carrying tools that could be used as weapons. Plasma cutters, magnetic clamps, emergency axes, and improvised gear that Tony Rodriguez had put together from spare parts. "We work with what we have," Morrison said. "Remember, our job is to save the Valerians, not to fight a war. We get in, we get the civilians out, and we get gone. Everyone clear on that?" The team nodded, but Morrison could see the anger in their eyes. These were good people who had seen too much suffering in their lives to just stand by and let it happen to others. The airlock opened with a hiss, and Morrison stepped onto the Peacekeeper. The first thing that hit him was the smell. The sharp scent of burned circuits mixed with something else that made his stomach turn. The corridor was dark except for emergency lighting, and there were scorch marks on the walls where energy weapons had been fired. Then he heard the crying. It was coming from deeper in the ship. The sound of children sobbing in fear and adults trying to comfort them in voices that shook with terror. Morrison felt his jaw clench as he realized what they were walking into. The team moved forward carefully, Hayes taking point with his weapon ready. They had only gone about 50 feet when they came to the first junction. And that's when they saw what the Throckary had done. Valerian bodies lay scattered in the corridor. These weren't soldiers who had died fighting. These were civilians who had been shot down while trying to run or protect their families. Morrison could see where someone had tried to drag themselves to safety, leaving a trail of blue blood on the metal floor before they had finally collapsed. Dr. Wilson knelt down to check the bodies, her medical training overriding her emotions. "These wounds are from energy weapons," she said quietly. Close range, they were executed. The sound of Throker voices came from up ahead, harsh, guttural laughter, mixed with orders being barked in their own language. Hayes held up his hand for everyone to stop, and they listened carefully. "Sounds like they're herding prisoners toward the main cargo hold," Hayes whispered. "Probably getting ready to transfer them to their own ships." Morrison made his decision quickly. "Kelly, take half the team and use those maintenance tunnels to get above the cargo hold. See if you can find a way to cut off their escape routes. Hayes, you and I will take the direct approach through the main corridors." Captain Wilson said urgently, "Some of these people are still alive. I'm picking up weak life signs. They need immediate medical attention. Do what you can for them. Doc, but stay with the team. We can't afford to get separated in here." The team split up as planned. Kelly led her group into a maintenance hatch that opened into the ship's service tunnels, while Morrison's group continued down the main corridor toward the sound of voices. What they found when they reached the cargo hold made Morrison's blood boil. The Throckary had gathered about 200 Valerian prisoners in the center of the large room. The aliens were tall and thin with pale blue skin, and right now they were huddled together in obvious terror. Children clung to their parents, while adults tried to shield the young ones with their own bodies. Around the edges of the room, Throckary soldiers stood guard. These were ugly creatures with thick, scaly skin and small, mean eyes. They carried energy rifles and war armor that looked like it had been cobbled together from scavenged parts. Morrison counted at least 15 of them, maybe more. The worst part was how the Throckary were treating their prisoners. They were jabbing at the Valerians with their weapons, forcing families apart, and dragging the strongest-looking adults toward the exit. Morrison realized they were selecting which prisoners to take and which ones they were planning to leave behind. Hayes appeared next to him, his face grim. "I count 16 hostiles, Captain. They're spread out pretty well, and they've got good fields of fire. This is going to be tricky." Morrison was about to respond when Kelly's voice came through his earpiece. "Captain, I'm in position above the cargo hold. I can seal the main exits with my plasma cutter, but once I do that, those Throckary are going to know we're here." "Do it," Morrison ordered. "Everyone else, remember, the civilians are our priority. Or take your shots carefully and watch your backgrounds. We can't risk hitting the prisoners. Kelly's plasma cutter flared to life above them, sending sparks showering down as she began sealing the cargo hold's main exit. The Thrakari soldiers spun around in confusion, shouting in their harsh language and raising their weapons. That's when Morrison and his team struck. They had spent years working together in dangerous situations, and they moved like a well-oiled machine. Hayes took out the first guard with a precisely aimed shot, while Wilson provided cover fire, as Tony Rodriguez had rigged up some kind of electromagnetic device that disabled 2 more Thrakari weapons before they could fire. The battle for the cargo hold lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. The human team used every advantage they could think of. Kelly dropped down from the ceiling behind enemy lines. Wilson used her medical knowledge to target the aliens' weak points, and Hayes coordinated their movements like the experienced, tactical leader he was. When it was over, the cargo hold was silent, except for the grateful sobs of the freed prisoners. Every single Thrakari soldier was down, and not one civilian had been hurt in the crossfire. Morrison looked around at his team, feeling proud of what they had accomplished. But he knew this was just the beginning. There were still more Thrakari somewhere on the ship, and there were still people who needed help. Good work, everyone, he said quietly. But we're not done yet. Let's find the rest of them. The last Thrakari ship was running like a scared animal, its engines glowing bright as it pushed toward the edge of the star system. But it wasn't running empty. Morrison could see on his scanners that the enemy vessel was packed with life signs. 47 Valerian civilians, who had been dragged aboard as the raiders tried to escape with at least some prize from their failed attack. "Captain, they're heading for the hyperspace jump point," Alina called from the pilot's seat. Her hands were steady on the controls, but Morrison could hear the tension in her voice. At their current speed, they'll be gone in 8 minutes. Morrison stared at the fleeing ship on his main screen. Those weren't just numbers on his scanner. Those were real people. Families who had been torn apart. Children who were probably crying for their parents right now. Innocent civilians who had done nothing wrong except be in the wrong place when predators came hunting. "Alina, pursuit course. Maximum speed," Morrison ordered. "Tom, I need you to listen carefully. When we catch up to that ship, I want you to disable their engines. Not destroy them. Disable them. Those people inside need life support and artificial gravity, or they'll die before we can save them." Tom Bradley nodded grimly from his weapons. "Station, I understand, Captain. Surgical strikes only. Take out their propulsion, but leave everything else intact." David Kane stepped up beside Morrison, his face worried. "Captain, this is going to be incredibly dangerous. If we board that ship while the Thrakari are still alive and armed, they might start killing hostages. These aren't civilized enemies. We're dealing with their pirates who would rather destroy their prizes than let us take them back." Morrison turned to look at his first officer. Kane was a good man and a smart one, but sometimes he thought too much about the risks instead of focusing on what needed to be done. "David, those people are going to die anyway if we let that ship jump away," Morrison said quietly. "The Thrakari don't take prisoners to give them comfortable lives. They take them to sell as slaves, or worse. We're their only chance." The Iron Hammer was gaining on the fleeing raider ship. Lena had pushed their engines to the maximum safe speed, and the gap between the two vessels was closing steadily. Morrison could see that the Thrakari captain was getting desperate. The enemy ship was making small course corrections. He was trying to throw off their pursuit, but it was no use. The human ship was faster and had a better pilot. 5 minutes to jump. "Point," Alina announced. "Tom, how close do you need to be for an accurate shot?" Morrison asked. Bradley was studying his targeting computer, making calculations. "At this range, I can hit them, but I need to be careful. Their ship is smaller than ours, so there's not much room for error. If I miss by even a few meters, I could hit their life support systems or their prisoner compartments." "Then don't miss," Morrison said simply. The distance continued to close. 3 minutes. 2 minutes. Morrison could see the Thrakari ship more clearly now on his view screen. It was an ugly vessel, all sharp angles and weapon mounts, built for intimidation rather than elegance. But right now, It was carrying precious cargo that Morrison was determined to recover. 1 minute, 2 weapons range, Bradley reported. I have a clear shot at their engine compartment. Morrison took a deep breath. This was the critical moment. Everything depended on Bradley's skill and a little bit of luck. Fire when ready. Bradley's finger pressed the firing stud and a beam of concentrated energy lanced out from the iron hammer. The shot was perfect, striking the Thrakari ship's main engines and causing a series of explosions that sent the vessel tumbling out of control. The life support systems remained intact, and Morrison could see that the ship's hull was still whole. Direct hit, Bradley announced. Their engines are completely gone. The ship isn't going anywhere. The crippled Thrakari vessel spun helplessly in space, no longer able to reach the hyperspace jump point. Morrison could see small explosions flickering along its hull as damaged systems overloaded. But the main structure was holding together. Lena, bring us alongside for docking, Morrison ordered, and call Dr. Wilson to the airlock. We're going to need medical assistance as soon as we get those civilians out. Morrison gathered his boarding team in the airlock. This time he was taking more people, everyone who could carry a weapon and had experience in dangerous situations. Tony Rodriguez was there with his improvised gadgets. Kelly Thompson had her plasma cutter and a tool belt full of equipment that could be turned into weapons. Hayes led a team of volunteers who had proven themselves during the fight on the Peacekeeper. Listen carefully, Morrison told his team. The Thrakari on that ship know they're trapped. That makes them extremely dangerous. Cornered animals do desperate things. And these particular animals have 47 innocent people they can use as shields or bargaining chips. He looked each of his people in the eye before continuing. Our job is simple. Get those civilians out alive. Everything else is secondary. The Thrakari had their chance to surrender when they started this fight. They chose to prey on innocent people instead. The docking tube connected with a solid thump. Morrison could hear sounds coming from the other side of the airlock, shouting in the Thrakari language. The sound of running feet and something that might have been crying. The airlock opened. Morrison's team moved into the enemy ship. What they found inside made their blood run cold. The Thrakari had crammed their Valerian prisoners into a single cargo compartment with no regard for their comfort or safety. Men, women, and children were packed together in a space that was too small, with poor ventilation and no sanitation facilities. Some of the prisoners were injured and weren't getting medical care, but the worst part was the fear in their eyes. These gentle people had been terrorized for hours by creatures they didn't understand, treated like objects rather than living beings. The Thrakari captain was waiting for them in the ship's main corridor, flanked by 6 of his remaining crew. Members, he was a large specimen of his species, with scarred hide and weapons that looked well used. When he saw Morrison and the human boarding party, he raised one clawed hand. Stop, he growled in broken galactic standard. We negotiate. You want prisoners? We make deal. Morrison looked at the alien captain with eyes that had seen too much suffering in the past few hours. Behind the Thrakari, he could see some of his crew members holding weapons pointed at the cargo hold, where the civilians were being kept. You want to negotiate? Morrison asked quietly. The Thrakari captain nodded eagerly, thinking he saw a chance to get out of this situation alive. Yes, we give you some prisoners. You let us go. It's a good deal. Morrison's expression didn't change. Here's my counteroffer. The fight that followed was swift and decisive. The human boarding team had learned important lessons during their previous battles with the Thrakari. These aliens were bullies who preyed on the weak, but when faced with determined opposition, they broke quickly. Hayes led one group to secure the prisoner compartment, while Kelly and her team made sure the Thrakari couldn't damage their own ship's life support systems. Tony Rodriguez used his technical skills to disable the aliens' weapons before they could use them. Within 30 minutes, the Thrakari ship was secure, and all 47 civilian hostages were safe. Dr. Wilson immediately began treating the injured, while the rest of Morrison's crew started transferring the rescued Valerians to the medical facilities aboard the Iron Hammer. As Morrison walked through the captured ship, checking on his people and making sure no Thrakari were hiding anywhere, he felt a grim satisfaction. The raiders had learned an important lesson today, though none of them had survived to pass it on to others. In space, there were predators, and there was prey. But sometimes the prey fought back. 18 hours after the last shot was fired, the Galactic Council fleet finally arrived at what had once been a massacre in progress, and was now a rescue operation in full swing. Admiral Vextar's flagship, the Harmony of Worlds, dropped out of hyperspace accompanied by 12 other Council vessels, crews expecting to find either a battle still raging or the wreckage of a failed rescue attempt. Instead, they found something that none of them had seen before in their long careers of peacekeeping and diplomatic missions. 6 Thrukari raider ships floated dead in space, their hulls dark and lifeless. But the Peacekeeper was alive with activity. As human crew members moved back and forth between the Valerian ship and the Iron Hammer, carrying medical supplies and helping injured civilians, temporary lights had been strung up to illuminate the damaged areas, and Morrison's people were working around the clock to make repairs and provide aid. Admiral Vextar was a Zelthian, species that looked somewhat like large praying mantises, but with more intelligence and much better manners. He had been a council mediator for over 40 years, specializing in resolving conflicts through careful negotiation and compromise. He had seen many battle sites in his career, but this one confused him. Where were the council rescue ships? Where were the proper medical facilities and the official investigation teams? Communications open a channel to the human vessel, Star ordered, his translator device converting his clicks and whistles into Galactic Standard. Morrison's weathered face appeared on the main screen of the Council flagship. Behind him, Vextar could see the bridge of the Iron Hammer, which looked more like the control room of a mining operation than a military vessel. The human captain was wearing a simple work uniform rather than a fancy military dress outfit, and there were coffee stains on his shirt. Admiral Vextar Morrison said politely, "Glad to see the Council finally made it out here. We've got the situation under control, but we could use some additional medical supplies if you have them. Dr. Wilson has been doing amazing work, but we've got over 3,000 injured civilians to take care of." Vextar's mandibles clicked nervously as he looked at the tactical display showing the destroyed Throkari ships. "Captain Morrison, I need to understand what happened here. Our preliminary scans show 6 enemy vessels completely destroyed and 0 survivors among the raider crews. This level of HFY CIENCY is unusual for a rescue operation." Expression didn't change. He was currently helping a young Valerian girl who had gotten separated from her family during the attack. The child had large, frightened eyes and blue skin that was pale with shock. Morrison spoke to her gently in the few words of Valerian he knew, then handed her over to one of his crew members, who was taking her to be reunited with her parents. "Admiral, the Throkari attacked a civilian transport carrying families," Morrison said, turning back to the screen. "They killed innocent people and took hostages. We responded accordingly. Behind Vextar, his staff of advisors and military experts were studying the battle data and shaking their heads in amazement. Commander Trell, a Centauran with 4 arms and excellent tactical knowledge, leaned over to whisper in the Admiral's ear. "Sir, the humans used mining equipment and improvised weapons to destroy 6 fully armed raider vessels. They turned asteroid debris into weapons, used maintenance tunnels for tactical advantage, and coordinated their attack with the precision of elite special forces. According to our records, this is just a civilian patrol ship," Vextar felt, his confusion growing. The Galactic Council had detailed files on human military capabilities, but this didn't match anything in their databases. These weren't trained soldiers. They were ordinary people who worked regular jobs in space. Yet they had accomplished something that would have challenged a full Council battle group. "Captain Morrison," Vextar said carefully, "I'm receiving communications from the Throkari Dominion government. They are upset about the complete destruction of one of their raider fleets. They're demanding an explanation for what they call an excessive use of force." Morrison paused in his work and looked directly into the camera. His eyes were tired, but completely steady. In the background, Vextar could see other humans continuing their rescue work, carrying injured Valerians, distributing food and water, and providing comfort to traumatized children. These people had been working non-stop for almost a full day, and they showed no signs of slowing down. "Admiral, let me make something very clear," Morrison said, his voice carrying a tone that made Vextar's translator device work overtime to convey the full meaning. "The Thrakari came here to murder and enslave innocent people. They got exactly what they deserved, and I'd do it again tomorrow if I had to." The communication channel went quiet for a moment. Council flagship. Alien officers looked at each other with expressions that ranged from shock to admiration to fear. Morrison continued, "Admiral, I've got work to do. 3,000 civilians need help, and my crew is the only thing standing between them and a very bad situation. If the Thrakari government has complaints about how we handled their pirates, they can file them with whoever handles that sort of paperwork, but if they send more raiders into human patrol areas, they're going to get the same treatment." Over the following weeks, as news of the rescue spread throughout the galaxy, the effects of Morrison's words became clear. The Thrakari Dominion, which had been expanding aggressively into frontier systems for the past 10 years, suddenly became much more cautious about their military operations. Intelligence reports showed that they had pulled their raider fleets back from 7 different star systems, apparently deciding that the risks were no longer worth the potential rewards. Other species took notice as well. The Valerians immediately requested a formal protection agreement with humanity, offering to share their advanced agricultural technology in exchange for security patrols in their space. Within a month, 2 other peaceful alien civilizations had made similar requests. But perhaps the most significant change was in how other species viewed humans before the rescue of the Peacekeeper. Most aliens saw humans as a relatively new species that had only recently developed space travel. They were considered tough and resourceful, but not particularly dangerous on a galactic scale. That perception changed completely after Morrison's patrol ship took apart an entire Thrakari raider fleet using nothing but determination, improvised weapons, tactical thinking that impressed even veteran military commanders. Admiral Vextar included a detailed analysis in his official report to the Council. The humans who participated in this rescue operation were not professional soldiers. They were miners, engineers, medical personnel, and other civilian workers. Yet they demonstrated combat effectiveness that exceeded our expectations for trained military units. More importantly, they showed absolute commitment to protecting innocent life, even at great personal risk. The Admiral's report continued, "It appears that humans do not make a distinction between civilians and combatants when it comes to defending others. They view attacks on innocent people as attacks on their entire species, and they respond accordingly. This suggests that any future conflicts involving humanity should be approached with extreme caution." Dr. Wilson later wrote in her personal journal, "Today, I learned something about my own species that I never fully understood before. We're not the biggest or the strongest or the most technologically advanced people in the galaxy. When someone threatens our pack, and apparently our pack includes anyone who can't defend themselves, we become something that even we don't fully recognize. We become the thing that monsters have nightmares about." Morrison never spoke publicly about the rescue operation, preferring to let his actions speak for themselves. But privately, to his crew, he said something that captured the essence of what had happened. "We didn't start that fight, but we sure as hell finished it. And if anyone else wants to test whether we're serious about protecting innocent people, they're welcome to try. The galaxy is a big place, but it's not big enough for both predators and prey to coexist peacefully. Someone has to choose which side they're on." The message was received loud and clear across the galaxy. Earth's children had found their place among the stars, and that place was standing guard over those who couldn't protect themselves. The age of easy prey was over.